Baltimore. Charm City. Neighborhoods full of history, great people, and lots of potential. A city trying to clean up its act after years of decay. A place where children should be safe to play on clean streets. But the pockets of problems are growing. Grime and crime make for bad neighbors. And now, even the once pristine parts of our wonderful city are in the fight of their lives to stop a city plagued by crime, grime, corruption, and failing schools. From Fox 45 News, this is a Your Voice, Your Future Town Hall, the Save Our City Tour. Neighbors helping neighbors, council district by council district.
Good evening and thanks for joining us for our 10th Fox 45 News Save Our City Town Hall. We're continuing to go around and hold these discussions in each and every Baltimore City Council district. Tonight, we're discussing District 13. However, due to some unforeseen circumstances, we had to make a last-minute venue change. So tonight, we are in Huber Memorial Church for this conversation. Like every other town hall, we have invited Mayor Brandon Scott to participate, as well as the council person representing the district. We invited the mayor, as well as Councilman Antonio Glover, who represents this district. However, both have refused to participate and listen to the concerns of their constituents. But that's not stopping us from having this conversation tonight. We have assembled a panel full of leaders and guests, and I want to introduce you to our great panelists this evening. First, we have Thiru Vignarajah, who is a former federal prosecutor and candidate for mayor. Giovanni Patterson, another former candidate who ran for city council president. We have P.M. Smith, who is a lifelong District 13 resident, and Leon Purnell, executive director of the Men and Family Center in Baltimore. Panelists, thank you so much for joining us this evening. We have a lot to talk about. Let's dive right in. And tonight we are discussing, we cannot have this conversation without talking about the news of the day and the shooting of a Baltimore Police Department officer who was ambushed while she was on the job earlier this morning patrolling in Curtis Bay. We heard the mayor and police commissioner talk earlier this morning, as well as just most recently discussing the latest updates. What do you think that this latest brazen attack on a police officer in a marked vehicle, up and down the panel, I want to get you all to weigh in on this. What does this speak to the level of violence that Baltimore is facing right now? We know we have surpassed 300 homicides for the 7th year in a row, and here we are, police officers getting targeted. Thiru, why don't you start us off?
You know, it's really awful. People all across Baltimore woke up this morning to some of the worst possible news at a time like this, 10 days before Christmas, to hear that a police officer was ambushed and shot and is now on life support. But you know who else woke up to that news? That officer's family. They got a call in the middle of the night, reliving out their worst nightmare, that their loved one had been shot while in the line of duty and was now at shock trauma on life support. And of course, all of us extend our thoughts and prayers to her and to our family. If there are surgeons anywhere in the world that can perform a miracle, it's Dr. Scalia and the surgeons at shock trauma. But it's not good enough just to extend thoughts and prayers on days like this. We have city politicians that have fueled the rhetoric that has villainized the police department, that have claimed that the police department's the problem. And it's not okay just on days like this to say, actually, they're heroes. They're heroes every day. They wake up every morning and kiss their loved ones goodbye and put a badge and a gun on and go into the most dangerous city in America and try to help keep us safe. And I would just ask that we all appreciate and honor the work that those men and women in blue do, not just today, not just on the tragic days, but every day here in Baltimore.
Giovanni?
So my first question isn't just one enough? It doesn't matter what time of year it is. It doesn't matter what day it is. We're losing lives left and right. The 300th murder this year was a 5-year-old, and followed by a 69-year-old woman in a church. And now we're looking at an officer in her car that was shot. What level of depravity do we have to be as a culture, as a city, that this continues to happen? I woke up to that this morning, and I didn't know what to say, what to think, what to feel, because this is the city that I love. the city my kids were born in, the city I met my wife in. And every day we're on the news for lives that are being lost.
PM Smith, you are a lifelong resident of District 13. Do you feel like the city council, your city councilman or the city council in general are representing your needs, your interests, your concerns as we continue to see this violence?
Number one, I'm not here as pastor of Hugh Memorial Church. I'm here as a resident of Councilmatic District 13. This guy, Mr. Glover, supposed to represent me. I pay him $69,000 a year. That's what council people make. And it's a part-time job to represent me. I called him to invite him personally. I said, if you will come, I'll be there, but I'll be in the audience. He said, I'm not coming. If you don't come, I'm going to be on the panel. He said, I'm not coming. I hung up. He has an excellent staff. He's not here. Got it? I don't know why he runs from little Miss McKenzie or little Miss. I don't know why he runs, but he weighed 300 pounds and he don't run that fast. We talk about cowards, right? This is what I want you to know. Can you all see this? I put it up here. I put it around the walls. We talk about 300 per year. But in 5 years, that's 2,000. And 9 out of 10 are African Americans who've been victimized by African Americans. We got a us problem. You don't like to hear it, but you know it's true. Now, we pay, and let me go through this. We pay our councilman $69,000. We pay vice president of city council $77,000. We pay the president, what's his name? Yeah, $128,000. We only pay the governor $170,000. And the mayor, what's his name? We pay him $194,000. $100, and he can't come to a meeting. And what about the state's? What's her thing? She makes $238. That's $250,000. Do you hear me?
Let me ask you.
And I'm not finished. DPW, the guy who's in charge of trash and stuff, he makes $245. Created a position, city manager, paying $250,000. Now the commissioner, he makes $275, and he's got a bulletproof vest. He got a gun. He got a shield, and he asking me for help. He asking you for help. Do your job. If you don't do your job, I'm calling Hank Voigt. Y'all know who Hank is? Chicago. I'm calling Hank to come in and clean the city up. That's my point. I want the prosecutors to prosecute. I want the police to police. I'm only going to talk about one thing tonight. I'm going to talk about crime. That's all I'm going to talk about tonight.
Why does it seem like these elected leaders don't want to do their job?
Okay, stop. Language is important. These peoples are not leaders. They are office holders. I know leadership when I see it. They're not leaders. Their behavior excludes them from being leaders. They're office holders. They pick up a check. I bet you they haven't missed a check because of COVID. All right? They're office holders. And, I mean, we got to articulate correctly. We talk about murders. Everybody gets that. But then we talk about non-fatal shootings. You know what they are? Attempted murders. Call it what it is. And what I'm saying to you is these people don't live in the world I live in. I went by the state's attorney's house the other day. There's a police sitting on the corner. I went by the mayor's apartment the other day. There's a police sitting in front of his house. Ain't no police sitting in front of my house. Nobody's sitting in front of my house but the local drug boys, right? I go to my house. The city required me to put an electrical outlet outside. They sitting on my steps charging their phones. So what happens when I ask them to move? What happens when they come every morning with coffee in their hands, eating where they throw their trash? And when they go to the bathroom, they're using my backyard. No. These people live in a parallel world. They don't live where I live. They lived in communities that are walled off from the crime because they got police protection. I want that protection.
Lynn, I want to bring you into this conversation.
I'm sorry I'm getting loud.
No,
I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's part of the conversation. I just want to make sure everyone has an opportunity to voice their ideas. How do you see the crime, as we obviously continue to talk about this and the issues plague Baltimore City? How is this impacting the communities at the local level, Leon? And explain from your perspective the impacts that can be made and what needs to change.
Well, there's a lot that needs to be changed. When we talk about crime, you have to look at multiple levels of crime. You know, you have little crimes that are misdemeanors, you have some medium-sized ones. In the inner city, you have a little bit of everything. I agree with PM. He's on point as usual. The thing that I see that troubles me with the police department is that they'll sit there with their lights on and observe drug trafficking right in front of them. And for the life of me, you know, if you're getting paid, you're supposed to do your job and arrest somebody. Mm-hmm. So that's one thing that I see. I have trouble with the amount of money that the city gets for the police department to put up all these gadgets that don't work. The gadget that they put up that's supposed to detect gunshot being fired in that area, it can't be working because the fire crackers that they send off and the bombs and everything should have sent off some signals. They should have police flying all over the place. And you hear it all night. Mm-hmm. So that's a lot of money that's wasted that could put some more police on the streets. And the commissioner was I think, a mistake from the beginning.
You mentioned the police department when it comes to officers watching perhaps crimes happening in front of them. And I want to put a pin in that and come back because I feel like that really relates to the state's attorney's prosecution policies, and those two are related. But staying on this topic just for a brief moment, because I want to bring in through today, we heard the mayor accuse Fox 45 News of pushing propaganda when we asked him about the crime and the violence and more than 300 homicides that continue to happen year after year after year. And we're asking the mayor about a crime plan that we're hearing from community members that they don't feel is working. How can the mayor say that when we are just asking questions and it feels like the mayor and other elected office holders don't want to talk about it?
Look, the mayor has an incredibly difficult job. It's one of the reasons he's paid $200,000 a year. It's understandable that he is overwhelmed by this moment. He's never faced something like this before. But I think to turn around and to be disrespectful, to not actually answer questions is not the solution to that problem. I ran for public office. I know how hard it is to be in the spotlight, to weather the difficult questions that journalists are charged with doing. But you're doing your job. And everybody in public service should understand that when a journalist is asking a hard question, just like when a prosecutor is asking a hard question, your responsibility as a public servant is to answer that question. Politicians don't get to pick which outlets cover them. Politicians don't get to pick which questions they want to answer. If you could have a journalist that would just ask softball questions, they wouldn't have to pay you $200,000 a year. And I think it just reflects the fact that our city politicians, and you're right, you got to be careful with calling them leaders, they're not leading right now. They have no sense of what to do. There is no strategy. There is no plan. There is no answer to what is the worst crisis in America that is unfolding in our backyard right now. And when it comes to having to answer a question like that, they decide to get rude instead of being respectful and actually give an answer.
I'd actually contend that they do know what to do. It's just our community enjoys misery. We've been comfortable being miserable. And why I say that is because when you turn around and look at every issue that we go through, no one speaks up. We all say, that's just the way it is. That's just the way, there's nothing I can do to change it. And our politicians know that. So that's why they don't have to be effective in what they're doing. They know exactly what they're doing. And they know you won't say anything.
Mm-hmm. I want to go to my colleague, Riel Creighton. The point of these town halls is to hear from you, the people who live in these districts, with your concerns. Riel, you're in the audience talking to our guests who are here tonight. What are you hearing from the people right now?
Well, there are, as usual, many concerns about the crime and the violence in the city. I'm actually here with John Winder, who is a member of this church, and I'll actually let him go ahead and ask his question. He had a question for the entire panel.
I'd like to ask you gentlemen, do you think that the mayor is taking us down the sewer hole? And the second question I ask is for Pastor Smith. If somebody asked you to be on the school board, would you accept it?
You want to answer from me? Number one, I'm an elder. This young man, who's mayor, has done good with his young life. The whole crew that are in there now, there are 14 councilmatic districts, 9 of them African American, most of them young folk. We gave the keys to the car to the kids too soon. They can't drive. They're driving us over a cliff. And I'm not the type of guy who's going to sit buckled up in the passenger seat listening to the radio. I'm grabbing them keys and I'm taking the wheel. They have no clue what to do. They're in over their heads. And I'm not talking about a recall, because that's an emotion response and you ain't going to get nothing. I'm keeping my powder dry. And all we have to do is unelect one of them. The rest of them will get the message, John, okay? Now, the school board. I would not sit on the school board because I'm the leader of a school. Hope Academy is an elementary school that I'm the chairperson of, that Hubert Memorial runs. Name another church that has a focus on the family, a facility like this, and a school independent of public money. I wouldn't be qualified. I wouldn't do that, because if I take that position, then I have to back off what we're doing with our school. And my thing with this is my kids are going to learn the ABCs, the 1, 2, 3s. That's repetition, repetition, repetition. But above and beyond that is character. We're building character into our young folk. Beyond that is the difference between intelligence and wisdom. Intelligence is what they have when they're pushing them buttons, but wisdom is what helps them make good decisions. Now, I nominate one of my daughters or one of my sons to do that, but I would not do it. I'm going to stick with my own school, and we're going to do what we need to do to elevate the quality of education in Baltimore City. Thanks for the question.
That's a great question, and it's a good segue into education. And Leon, I know you have a point, and I want to get to you first with this question as well. For the past 5 years, Project Baltimore, as we know, has been reporting and uncovering tragedy after tragedy and failure within the Baltimore City school system. But throughout the 5 years, most elected leaders in Baltimore have remained mainly silent on that issue. What does that tell you?
Well, let me say this first. One of the reasons we don't have this place packed tonight is because people don't have confidence in the town hall meeting. A town hall meeting is not just because the cameras are here. It should be a meeting that we hold, and out of it should come some solutions. We always talk, but we don't put anything into action, and that's what we need to do. PM brought up some good points as usual, but it don't mean anything if we just talk about it and we don't put in action.
Those solutions require the elected leaders to show up, though.
No, they don't. No, they don't.
How?
No, they don't. Because what are you going to hear? You hear the same thing. You know, I listened to Varut. He was a candidate. Many of the things that are happening now that the police are supposedly doing, listen to their plans that they had when they were candidates. They were worthless, all of them. They were worthless. The money keeps going the same path every year. Follow the money. The money for the programs that are actually bringing about transitioning and changing people's lives, we don't get any money. I've never gotten money from the city. And I've been down there 20-some years. Mm-hmm. And I get people off the streets on a regular basis. So there's a number of things that are wrong. One of them is that when we hold a town hall meeting, we shouldn't leave here until we have some solutions, some things that we're going to put into action. And we don't need the cameras. But you know, every time they have it, I came to the last one, I was very disappointed because it was a short time for the people that wanted to ask questions.
And that's what we want to have more questions as possible, and that's what I want to get your take on the education question in particular.
Well, the education thing, I think we have the wrong superintendent for education. Our schools are terrible.
Mm-hmm. Through, what do you think that elected leaders are staying virtually silent on the failures highlighted inside city schools?
I mean, look, our city politicians have basically decided that the schools are not their responsibility. They've basically decided that crime is not their responsibility. They've basically decided that fixing the streets are not their responsibility. The economy is the federal government's responsibility. The police department and crime, well, that's a state agency. The school board is appointed by the mayor. Every single one of the members of the school board who picks the CEO is appointed by the mayor. And nevertheless, we hear our city politicians say, oh, it's a state agency. It's not our job. It takes a certain kind of person to want to take something that is a mess. The school system, my mom and dad taught in those schools. I am so proud of the work that they did in those schools for decades. But let's be honest, those schools are a mess. It takes a certain kind of leader who says, I want to take responsibility for that mess. We don't have those kind of leaders in Baltimore City Council or in the Baltimore City Hall. What we have are people that want to pretend it's not their job, and they want to focus on things they can actually achieve. A plastic bag ban, that's a good idea. That's an easy thing to do, so they do it. But the hard stuff, and there are solutions. Universal pre-K for every 3- and 4-year-old so our kids know how to read basic alphabets before they get to kindergarten. That's a solution we could be talking about with them if they were here. And on crime, on the economy, there are concrete solutions that can be done. And we know this because Baltimore is the only city in America that is losing population and is smaller in 2021 than it was in 1921. Other cities have figured it out. There's been a renaissance in so many of these cities, and we have fallen further and further behind because our city politicians are too busy keeping their job rather than doing their job.
Giovanni, do you think that the city government doesn't want to fix the problem? Do you think that they're satisfied with the current status quo when it comes to crime and the education system?
They're absolutely satisfied. I mean, what does it take to say, I don't know why Brandon Scott doesn't just say, hey, I recognize that there's failures in our Baltimore City schools, and I'm going to do everything in my power to fix it. That's all he literally has to say. But has he said it?
He also has the power to call a special city council meeting, but he won't.
All the power exists, but they don't want this to happen because ultimately it affects their votes. As many people as they can get to continue to be dependent upon the government, non-independent, I'm going to say it, essentially creating future generations of slaves to be dependent upon the government will continue to expand, and they will never lose their jobs.
Can I address that, please?
Please.
I said I would only talk about it from a criminal perspective. What's happening in Baltimore City by way of our school system is black-on-black crime. The majority of the administration is black. The majority of the student body is black. I came through a totally segregated school system. Explain why I got a better education in a segregated school system than our kids are getting today. And it's not a racial matter. It's not a racial matter. Of the last 11 CEOs of the public school system, 8 of them have been African Americans. Why aren't our kids getting a better education? There's no focus. They don't view what they do as a calling. It's just a job and a paycheck. Now, let me say this about the politicians that are not here. They're streaming this. You better believe Mr. Glover is looking at this. You better believe Mr. Scott is looking at this. You better believe that the state's attorney and the president is looking at this, right? And they're listening.
Why won't they show up?
Because they're office holders and not leaders. They're in over their heads. They're drowning, and they don't have to listen to us because not enough of us raise enough hell.
The city is drowning.
You know, we speak as if they have the option to do what they want. Very few of them do. Most of them got in office with far more money than you can imagine. So, do you think they can make the decisions they want to make? Kathy made that mistake. She thought she could speak out about the Pimlico racetrack. And what happened? She got charges brought against her shortly afterwards. There's money behind many of these candidates. We need to pay attention to it. That money don't come out of the air, and people not giving you that kind of finance to just go in and pay attention to what happens afterwards. They have demands, and we forget about that. You know, you're talking about Brandon can do this. Can he really?
The money don't come.
Look,
The money don't come from us. You know, be for real.
Don't come from.
If the money came from the communities, then the community representatives could represent you.
The mayor was elected. The mayor was elected by the people. Are you?
Your taxpayer money, we talking about when they get in office, when they run for office. We're talking about that money where they get hundreds of thousands of dollars. Campaign money. That's a difference.
So you're saying they're beholden
And that
to the
don't come from
contributors?
us. It does not come from us. Follow the money.
Isn't it up to the voters to make sure that they're electing the people that they feel will represent them in office?
Well, we have to do some voters' education because we can't keep putting the same people in there and expect different stuff.
Mackenzie, if I can, I think that last point is so important because Pastor Smith.
That's right, it is.
Pastor Smith is right. These politicians are making a political calculation to not show up. It's not because they don't realize it's important. Pastor Smith is right. They're sitting at home watching this. They're going to watch the excerpts. They realize that thousands of people all across Baltimore are watching this. They're not showing up because their political calculation is they'd rather risk not showing up and giving a terrible answer to a question they don't have an answer to than giving an answer and being held accountable for it down the road. They'd rather hope that you guys don't pay attention in a couple of years. But what I think they're not accounting for, because this does feel different, there's never been this kind of relentless focus on city politicians. There's never been cameras in their face every day, every hour, in every council district. There are more people that come to these town halls every 2 weeks, and they don't keep showing up. One of these days, this room is going to be filled, and they're going to suddenly realize that their silence is going to cost them their jobs. We just haven't gotten there yet.
Pam Smith, I want to ask you this because when it comes to the crime, I mean, we've heard Evelyn Player, the 69-year-old woman stabbed in a church. The 5-year-old who was killed was the 300th homicide. The 13-year-old who was shot and killed outside of a rec center. We have a police officer who was shot on the job today. If this isn't a tipping point for the city for elected office holders to make some sort of change, what will be?
Don't forget Mr. Rogers that was shot in front of his kids while he was taking
Right, the DPW worker, yep.
Okay.
On camera.
All right, now, these kids don't know what they're doing. They don't know how to respond. My answer is simple. Make the police police. And make the prosecutor prosecute. That's what we're paying them to do. Now, the commissioner, when he gets to that level, he becomes more of a politician than a police. And everybody, every police in every district knows that. Got it? All the money we're spending on these offices, where's the urgency? I'm a man of a certain age. I'm 75. I ain't got 5 years. All right? I want them to do something now. And there's nothing they can do to me at this point in my life because I'm looking to my daughter and to my grandchildren. So whatever I say and whatever I do is for their benefit. They don't have a clue. And I'm not going to holler. I'm not going to scream. I'm not going to get emotional. Don't come to me unless you want the truth, right? I'm not going to holler. I'm not going to get emotional. Boom. I'm going to wait until you ask for my vote again.
Would you vote for the current office holders?
I might just find me somebody else because there has not been this. This is a single party ruled city and state.
Is that the problem?
That is the problem, because we get the same, regardless of the person or the personality, regardless of the party, we get the same policies over and over, and they don't come from us. They come from other folk who give them money, so they can be the mouthpiece and advance their agenda and not mine. My thing is this. I was born in the Eastern District. I've only lived in the Eastern District all of my life. I live 4/10 of a mile from where I was born. I could live in Ellicott City, but I'm not going nowhere. I've been living on Luzerne Avenue ever since I was 19, and it's a shame to see what has happened, not just to my community, but to this city. And like Mr. Theroux said, the population has declined. Our state's attorney has basically legalized drugs. And she talking about low level. I talked to one of my members yesterday, and she said, I'm going to hospital. I'll be in there for a couple of days. It's minor surgery. Wait a minute. When it's somebody else, it's minor surgery. But when you going in and they gonna knock you out, that ain't minor surgery, that's major surgery. And what I'm saying is, low-level crimes, yeah, maybe where you live, but when they peeing in my backyard, right? When they breaking in my car, right? I got a case now down there. They broke into my house. I'm not happy with that.
Yeah.
Okay? Let the police, let the prosecutors prosecute, and with Mr. What's the guy in charge of the commissioner?
Michael Harrison.
He going back to New Orleans. $275,000 a year. He never sold his house in New Orleans. He going back to New Orleans, set and rich.
PM, thank you.
I'm calling Hank Voigt. That's what I'm doing. I'm calling Hank up in here.
Thank you for that. Let's go back to Riel now. I see you are joined with another member of our audience for another round of questions. Riel, tell us more.
Yeah, this is another concerned citizen, Mackenzie. This is Velda May. She is a resident of this district. She had a question that was related to about making sure that city leaders are connected to the community they're serving.
Yes. Good evening, everyone. I just want to say that I'm very concerned with the condition of our city and our elected leaders that we have elected to represent us. It's a total disconnect. And my thing is this. I said today, if no one would listen to me, I would get on a crate in a soapbox and get a bullhorn, and start preaching, because it is a very serious state that is going on, and they are not being held accountable for what they are allowing to happen in the cities. I know Baltimore is Baltimore, but I speak for cities all across America. We're dying, we're suffering, we have pain, and the way that we can resolve these issues are to go back to the old landmarks where people said yes and people said no, and they meant it. And they were always, your word was your bond. And if you did not do what you were said to do, you were ousted out.
Who would you like to direct this to, Velda?
I would definitely like to direct this to our city council, who makes all of these laws, who determine what services that our city is going to get. We have moved to a digital age, and all the doors are locked. We have no way to get in touch with people because they're all behind doors, they're all behind telephones that they will not answer.
We all, I think, wish they were here. Perhaps one of the council members can maybe, about how you can connect more with city leaders.
Okay, so let's say it like this. What's their name? Thank you.
Giovanni.
I'm talking to all of them. Stand up to a standard and move to a point where you become concerned and compassionate towards people.
Thank you, Velda.
Giovanni Patterson, why don't you take that question?
Yeah, to respond to that, they know exactly what they're doing, and they're selling you out to the highest bidder. As long as crime is high, more money can come to the city. They're not looking at what problems are solvable. They're looking at which problems are fundable this year, right? They know exactly what they're doing when it comes to our school system, when it comes to our education system. As long as they can keep the kids failing, they can get more money. You are being sold. You are literally being sold. And then when it comes campaign season, they talk about, hey, we got this much more money to go to this. And that's their winning message every year. And we celebrate and say, hey, they got more money for our schools. They got more money for crime reduction strategies and programs and studies and task force and everything else. And we don't say anything back. We don't return.
We know that the city school system gets more than $15,000 a year per student. When Kerwin kicks in 2023, I was just looking at the data, and the city is expected to get more than $4,700 additional per student, and that number will escalate. Is more money going to fix this education problem?
Character fixes the education problem. Accountability fixes the education problem. We have schools all over the country that don't get half as much funding and perform 10 times better than our schools. And we have great kids in our schools. We have great teachers, but there's no accountability.
Leon, did you want to weigh in?
Yeah, I do. One of the things that allow this to happen is City Hall is closed. Why?
Bill?
The municipal building is closed. Why?
The mayor, we just asked the mayor about
The
it.
rest of the city can open up and we can go into restaurants. Why can't we go in City Hall? We pay.
Walmart.
We pay for it. One of the things that prevent us from really voicing our opinions is City Hall being closed.
Right.
Because we can go into City Hall in their session and raise a whole lot of sand. And we can get some act right. But if they got it closed, what we get?
Nothing.
Now, this meeting, again, I'm going to go back to it. A town hall meeting is not just to come in here with the cameras rolling and think that you're going to get something out of it. You leave with the same thing you came in here, just hearing some rhetoric. Sit down and start drafting some demands, some written demands. If they're not met, then we can bring it up during election time and stop people from being elected when we know they're not doing anything. Now, to Tony's credit, he did come to my Christmas giveaway yesterday.
Okay.
And helped with a lot of the things that we did for the 5 schools that we presented gifts to and coats and so forth. So I don't know what happened with the communication that you all had.
Why wouldn't he come here?
I don't know. I mean, speak for that, but
city politicians are very good at showing up for ribbon cuttings and photo ops.
Celebrations. Right.
They won't miss one of those because there's not hard questions to answer there. And this is something that, look, Mr. Giovanni and I have to disagree about something because I don't think these are people of bad faith. I think they are incompetent. I don't think they know exactly what they're doing. I think they have no idea. And when we talk about concrete solutions, we know what some of them are. If there was additional money that was being given to Baltimore City to make sure that there was heat and air conditioning in all of our schools, I would embrace that. That is good use of money because we should not be sending our kids, condemning our children to schools that don't have heat or air conditioning in 2021. If we had more money coming to the police department to recruit more police officers because we're down hundreds of officers, that would be a good use of money. But the problem, McKinsey, is we have no idea where the money is going. And every time we ask for a top-to-bottom audit of any agency, DPW, the police department, the school system, they say, no, we can't do that. We don't have the power. Of course you can. And any agency, any business that gets not tens of millions of dollars, not hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars each year ought to be subject to a public audit so we know where that money is going.
It's the taxpayers' money.
We actually did. We elected Bill Henry reluctantly, mainly because of his promising to have audits. Do you remember that?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Everybody should remember that. That was the thing he ran. That was his mantra. He ran on the fact that he was going to have audits in every department. We had an audit in the police department recently. For years, we have been trying to get the police department to tell us when they were going to melt these guns down, when they were going to burn up these drugs that they get, and we have yet to get it. Bill.
That's right, Bill.
Big
Bill
money,
Good.
Bill Gooden over there. We've been down City Hall how many times, Bill? Too many. And we have yet to get a date where we can go and see these things happening. So if the drugs are not being burnt and the guns are not being burnt, they're probably being sent right back out on the street.
Right.
So, you know, at some point we got to say enough is enough, and we got to do something about it.
When it comes to the policing, I know that was a big issue, and we know that the city state's attorney's prosecution policies have met with a lot of criticism. PM Smith, do you think that City State's Attorney Marilyn Mosby's selective enforcement of the laws that are currently on the books, is that contributing to what we're seeing, this sense of lawlessness across Baltimore?
Absolutely. Take the criminals that are sitting on my corner. They have no concern for the consequences because they are none. The police officers that are sitting in their vehicle and watching them have more concern for the consequences of their interaction than the criminal does. Okay, I'm a rookie, I'm just getting started. What when I step out? Okay, I'm about to retire and I got 15 years. What if I step out? From the minute they step out, there's a camera on them. From the minute they step out, oh, what you talking about, man? Why you messing with? No. In my day, we on the corner, police roll by and say, give me my corner. What do? We gave him the corner. It's lawlessness. It's anarchy. That's the basis for the chaos. There's no authority, whether it's the police, that's why we shoot them. Whether it's the priest, that's why we rob them. Whether it's an elder, there's no authority that they must answer to. Got it? These young'uns, we gave them the keys to the car too soon. They can't drive, they're going off the cliff, and I ain't rolling with them. Got it?
I know that when it comes to the unreported crimes, that has been a topic of conversation for quite some time. Is it difficult to even know how many crimes are happening across the city if they're either not being reported or not, an investigation is never even opened into it? We see the data. We have the conversation with the mayor about violent crime not really being down like he says, because he's only looking at it excluding the common assaults. How do we even know how bad the situation is in the city?
I mean, we've all heard countless stories of people that are victims of crime that say, you know what, it's just not worth calling the police because nothing's going to be done about it. Somebody, you know, steals something from my front porch. Right. Somebody breaks in my back window. Somebody breaks into my car. Somebody assaults me, but they don't send me to the hospital. It's not worth calling the cops because they're not even solving homicides and shootings and carjackings. There is no question they're not going to have time to take my case seriously. And maybe there's nothing that makes me more frustrated than when I hear city politicians say crime is down.
That's a lot.
That is the...
the mayor has said it multiple times.
I mean, if you are a city politician walking around town telling people that crime is down, you are insulting their intelligence. You are telling people that you can lie to them right to their face and expect to get away with it. You can go on the police departments every 2 weeks. They publish a list of all the crimes. Carjackings are up. Shootings are up. Murders are up, aggravated assaults are up, common assaults are up, rapes are up, robberies of banks are up, robberies of commercial establishments are up. Every single one of these categories is up. And then you have the audacity, because you put a little asterisk and you take out common assaults, to say that crime is down. That is insulting to the intelligence of your constituents.
But this been happening for so many years. When O'Malley was in office, he had crime stats, and it was a whole bunch of junk. But we accepted it.
Martin O'Malley may have started...
When we went down City Hall and protested that mess, because you can't tell me violent crimes are down when they're having more murders.
Yeah.
Right.
You can't tell me violent crimes are down when they don't murder you, but they done shot you up.
That's right.
So that's crazy.
Let's go to Riel, because I know that you're standing by with another member of our audience who has a question for our panel. Riel, who do you have?
Mackenzie, I'm here with Bill Gooden. He's actually somebody who's been referenced by members of the panel tonight, and he has a two-part question. He promised very quick questions, but One of them that he sort of made his mission is about City Hall. You believe it's an issue of responsiveness, sort of a symbol, the fact that it's still closed, responsiveness to the citizens.
Well, I'm going to say two things real quick. The people's in pen play because we letting them play us, right? When you got City Hall closed, when you have to make an appointment, go to Social Security, MVA, and everywhere you need to conduct your business, they tell you it's COVID, but you got thousands of people that can go to stadiums, concerts with no mask, then these people setting you up for the future. It ain't about no COVID, you know what I'm saying? So we have to stand up and make them do what we want them to do, point one. Point two, in reference to the drugs. For over 30 years, we have said the police need oversight. It should be no agency to oversee themselves. The police audit was just done by the state legislative auditors. Found the police guilty in terms of drugs missing, guns missing, cash missing, and other stuff. The cash going to people's pocket, right? But if guns and drugs missing, we have to assume that they're coming back into the street. So we can't talk about reducing crime, reducing murders, but we don't want to hold an agency responsible that's taking guns and drugs off the street. Makes no sense.
Maybe through you can possibly take that as a former federal prosecutor.
I agree.
I mean, look, the police department is like any other agency. It's like any other business. It's going to go as far as it can unless it has oversight. People have to show leadership. People have to have a level of transparency. And if there's one thing I would urge all of us to do, it is to have a little bit of a longer memory, because we can't afford short memories. When the comptroller says he's going to do an audit of every agency on the campaign trail and then doesn't do a single audit when we gets in, we have to remind him of that pledge. Do you remember what the mayor said about the Board of Estimates when he was campaigning? He said he was going to reduce the power of the mayor on the Board of Estimates. Then he gets into office and says, you know what? I kind of like it here, having control of the Board of Estimates. Right. Do you remember earlier in the year and when he was campaigning what the mayor said about crime in the first year? It's December 16th, right? In the first year, murders were going to go down by what percent? Anybody remember?
Yeah.
15%. That's what he said. It was supposed to get on 285 murders. You haven't heard the mayor talk about that. The mayor and the police commissioner said that they had issued a robust recruitment plan because they were going to get more police officers into the police department so they can solve crimes, so they can solve homicides, so they can do community policing. We are, at the end of this year, a net loss of 100 police officers. We're worse at the end of the year than we were at the beginning, and we've forgotten the promises and pledges they made because we're not paying enough attention.
Right.
Giovanni Patterson, I want to ask you a question about leadership. When it comes to the role of city council in this conversation, we hear a lot about passing the buck to Annapolis. We hear a lot of that being put on the governor or the federal role, but the city council plays a significant role in this conversation. It can make policies and it can implement change, but they're not.
In regards to crime or education?
Both.
Both.
One and the same.
Yeah,
they are linked.
Right now, the city council is just a boys' club or whatever you want to call it nowadays. They have this kiss the ring mentality. Kiss up to them, and they maybe show up. They're not accountable to do their job. When it comes to the crime plans or legislation, what happens, especially with the state's attorney just making a blanket policy, that's supposed to go through the legislation of the city, which it never touches. They're completely not following the processes set up by our city charter, which I encourage everyone to read. There has to be a level of civic accountability in this as well. The city charter is on the Baltimore City Legislar website. Everyone needs to download it and read it to understand what these people are really supposed to do. There's boards and commissions set up for them to hold these people accountable, but they just completely ignore the jobs altogether.
Go ahead.
PM muttered something. He said they're one of the same. They are. One of the things that you get from a bad school is more kids turned out to the streets.
Right.
Poor performance in the school forces kids out into the streets. Black males have been under attack for a number of years. When you look at the school system, that's one of the major problems. The second thing is when we allowed them to close the rec centers 8 years ago, when I almost got locked up down there several times in City Hall with Kim Trueheart and several other citizens. Big mistake. Now they on the streets robbing elder people, smoking blunts out in front of you. So when you create the monster or you allow it to happen, don't cry when it comes to your doorstep. You know, that was a pivotal moment.
Look, the mistakes of the past are a lesson for what we can do to get out of this. And I think it's really important to appreciate that we can get out of this. If you start bringing murders down just a little bit, if you start heading in the right direction, we had murders to below 200 in 2011. Can you imagine if we got back to below 200? You would start convincing some families to stick around instead of moving to the county. You would start convincing some businesses to invest in our city. You would start convincing some developers to start rebuilding that housing. And those would create jobs. And that would mean that instead of turning to a gang for some money, you could turn to the local developer for a construction job or a plumbing job. And those jobs would create kids that wanted to make sure that they had jobs too. And this virtuous cycle would start. But right now, whether it's picking up the trash, whether it's the water bills being right, whether it's the schools, whether it's the economy, whether it's crime, I want to ask you honestly, can you name one thing that is working in Baltimore City? Anyone? Can somebody shout out one thing that is working in Baltimore City?
Me.
Yeah, the Men and Family Center.
Me.
I mean, this is the silence. That deafening silence means that nothing that we care about, nothing that we elect our municipal leaders to try and fix is actually getting fixed. And at some point, we all have to say, raising our voices together, enough is enough.
When will that time come? Because we've seen the high-profile murders. We've seen the families. We just heard a family member, a sister, an older sister of the police officer who was shot, crying on television today, asking Baltimore to stop. And if that's not going to do it, what will resonate with the community? PM?
What will resonate in the community? Let me say this. The police commissioner is appointed by the mayor. If we need a new commissioner, we need to get a new mayor.
But that election is years away.
The policies that are in place by the present office holder, if you're not happy with them, we need a new, what's her name? A new what's her name? Mosley, yeah, we need a new
state's attorney.
And again, they will not respect you until you say, Brandon, your time is up. And he goes, because we voted him out. Or the office holding the state's attorney, you need to be able to say, your time is up. No more words, no more arrogance. Go on down to Florida, do whatever else you need to do, but you will no longer hold the office here until we as a community, Bill, until we as a community, I'm not going to holler, I'm not going to stress, I'm not going to get emotional about a recall. I'm going to wait for that day.
Her election is coming up in 2022.
I know, and I know who the candidates are.
Do you think that the current situation will play a role in this election?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
If we remember.
Now,
that's true. We got to make them pay. Yeah. That's the only way we can hold them accountable. Leadership starts at the top, but accountability has to start at the bottom. That means us.
Now, if you look at the contract that they signed with the commissioner, that's ridiculous.
5 years.
He's locked in. You know, even if you get rid of him tomorrow, he gets paid $275,000 per year for the rest of those years. You know, that was a problem with me in the first place. First of all, why do you bring a commissioner in and pay him more than the mayor?
Through what about the state's attorney's office race? We know that that's coming up in 2022, like we talked about, the current crime rate, the prosecution policies, the sense of lawlessness. How do you think that'll impact voter turnout.
Look, if people aren't paying attention to that race, it's because they don't know how important the state's attorney is in Baltimore. Choosing which cases to bring, what deals to strike, which prosecutions to drop, that is a vital responsibility that we charge someone with. We elect that person. We pay them a lot of money to make sure that they do that particular job. And if you start thinking about the responsibilities of that role, what is crystal clear, I think, to anyone who's paying attention is that we don't need a politician. We don't need a defense attorney. We need a prosecutor, a person who believes that their responsibility is to make sure that violent criminals are actually arrested and prosecuted and taken off the streets, that is what they have to do for the sake of their mothers and grandmothers. They have to do for their children and grandchildren. That is a noble responsibility. It's not a political responsibility. It's not a stepping stone to something else. It's not a way to get on the front page of magazines and on the front headlines of national newspapers. It is a responsibility of public service. And I think crystal clear to me after watching what has happened is we do not need another politician. We do not need a defense attorney. We need a proven prosecutor for that role. That's the only way you're going to turn things around.
Briefly, time is winding down. This hour has gone by fast, but I do want to go up and down the panel really quickly. We know that the mayor has been in office for just about a year now. The current situation in the city, looking at where we are, more than 300 homicides. If each one of you could tell us a brief report or a grade that you would give the mayor, what would it be? Leon, why don't we start with you? Again, brief, all of you.
Well, it's a hard question. What I would say is this. If we change the course of some of the money, we can get some of the people off the streets and into working positions. There's a lot of jobs out there. We don't have people that can fill them.
Give them a grade. What would you give them?
I've not looked at all of the things, but right now there will probably be a failing grade.
PM, a grade.
A vote of no confidence, 0 grade. I'm grabbing the wheel, I'm taking the keys.
Giovanni, a grade.
F.
Through?
Look, I think I think his heart is in the right place, which gets you a C-.
All right. Thank you very much to all of our panelists and everyone who joined us this evening for this conversation. Again, we invited the mayor and the councilman to participate in this conversation. We'll continue to host them, and hopefully the elected leaders will show up to participate next time. Have a great night.